Voice Show is a dialogue between the host and the listeners about their relationships. This show is not an attempt to assess, diagnose, or treat any mental health or illness condition. Please consult your physician, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist for personal matters.
Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine and have Sean in studio. Now, the show is about what matters most in life: our mind, our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and our fulfillment in this beautiful journey of life. Now, in this show, I'll bring you the research on what prayer does for your life. Does it really work? Well, we'll find out. And then I will speak to Reverend Sylvia Sumter, the senior minister of the Unity of Washington, D.C. She will explore how spirituality and life experience transforms lives and explore ways to become aware of your innate divine potential. And if you'd like to call us, I would love to hear from you. And I'm sure Dr. Sylvia Sumter would love to hear from you. Call us live. We'll have you on the show. 951-922-3532. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan, and I have great news for you. I'm offering a special time-limited offer to anyone who's interested in online therapy or coaching sessions. I've developed the awareness integration model, which allows in only 12 weeks to raise your self-esteem and confidence and let go of your thoughts and emotions that produce depression and anxiety for you. So call today to schedule your online session and save $600. Call me today at 818-648-2140. That's 818-648-2140, or go to www.foojan.com.
So this is the tip of the week. Now, last week actually, because of Valentine, we all been reminded of love, the concept of love in our lives. Whether it was friends or whether it's family or whether it's our intimate relationships and marriages and even love toward ourselves. So some of us pampered ourselves. I guess love was the conversation, whether you had it or the lack of it. So let's explore the quality of the way you express your love or receive love. So as I'm going through this conversation, think about it. Just go back, look at yourself, and look at what you do every day. How do you express love? Like, do you do it verbally? Do you do it with acting it physically, like hug someone or kiss them? Or you do something for the person, you get them gifts, or you know what they like and you do that, or you comfort them. Like, you'll buy them food or bring food for them or make them comfortable. What type of giving love do you do? And is the way you give love is exactly the way you like to receive it? Or do you have an expanded way of receiving love for yourself? Do you express it differently to your mate or children or pets or parents or siblings, friends, at work and with your community? I know some people, for example, love to share their loving expressions with their children, but when it came to their mates, they're like shying away and they're like, I'm not used to it, I can't say it. Or that the way they get excited about their pets, and then when it comes to somebody else, they're like, well, I can't get that close. So I'm sure you probably express your love differently, but it's interesting. How do you do it differently? And what are the boundaries that you set up for yourself so that you express it differently? How do you love yourself? Like by shopping, doing what you like, by pampering yourself physically or eating well? What are the ways that you love? Or do you actually talk nicely to yourself and you remind yourself of all the good stuff that you have about you versus saying all the negative things and seeing all the bad things about yourself? Is your love attached to a feeling of joy, happiness, or sadness, grief, or anxiety, or sorrow, depending on your previous experiences in life. I know people, when talking about love, sometimes because they've had traumas or breakups, or somebody that they really loved left them, they will be bitter. So every time we talk about love, they're like, oh, nobody should love, or love is hurtful and painful, and I don't want to have it. I don't want to ever be in love again. Or some people lost their um, loved ones. So the minute you talk about love, there's a grief and concept of why should I love? I'm going to lose them. Anybody I love, I lose. So what's the point of opening myself up and attach? And you talk to other people who look at love and they just get joyous and happy with it. What does love associate for you? Now, love is the essence of joy and inner happiness as you allow it to flow freely from you to you and others. Now, allow it to warm you up and heal you inside. It is a healing experience when you actually love yourself and allow yourself to open your heart to love others. Now, the essence that makes life worth living and engaging in. Most people who become very depressed and close off the way that they love themselves, the way that they love life and people around them, kind of go in. And it's as if like life isn't worth it. Whenever I talk to clients who are very depressed, they usually talk about what's the purpose of life. And many times when they go beyond themselves and they open this concept of love for themselves and everybody around them, they get engaged with people. And that type of engagement brings them a little bit of a happiness and joy and actually brings them some purpose. So the quality of experiencing love internally and allowing it to flow externally will determine the quality of your fulfillment in life and in relationships. I hope that helps, and I hope it brings up conversation of love for you. We'll be right back with the latest research about prayer.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, the awareness path to create the life you want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490AM.com.
Welcome back to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and let's talk about prayer. What is prayer good for? And what is the evidence for it? Now, for most believers, it isn't a substitute for data-based solutions. It is a personal resource that complements other thoughtful action. Whenever there's a national tragedy, such as a mass shooting or a natural disaster, two phenomena can reliably be observed. Even when we actually have somebody who we hear they're sick or something happens to them, first people offer or ask for prayers. Second, others respond by criticizing, even mocking prayer. They argue that we need to turn to science, not faith, to solve problems. Atheist public intellectuals often make a similar case against prayer, that because evidence that is effective is lacking, it is a waste of precious time and energy. Now, it appears many critics don't realize that the empirical evidence reveals that prayer can be quite helpful. And we'll tell you how. According to the Pew Research Center's Religious Landscape Study, over half of American adults pray daily, and less than a quarter seldom or never pray. Prayer is not an exclusive to the religiously affiliated. Pew finds that 20% of Americans who are religiously unaffiliated pray daily, and that another 18% pray weekly or monthly. And despite people's tendency to frame debates about the value of religious beliefs and practices in political terms, daily prayer is a bipartisan activity. They show that 42% of people who pray daily are Republican and 40% are Democrat. Pretty close, huh? People all over the world from different cultures, faiths, and backgrounds regularly pray. A number of studies suggest that prayer is positively associated with well being and physical health. For instance, nationwide survey of older adults found that the negative effects of financial problems on health were significantly reduced among those regularly prayed for others. Religious practices such as prayer also contribute to perceptions of meaning of life, which promote psychological well-being. Some studies have found mixed results when it comes to the association between prayer and mental health. Results from a large national survey helped clarify this relationship. Now, researchers found that the prayer is psychologically beneficial for those who perceive God as loving, but may cause anxiety for those who view God as distant or unresponsive. Other research suggests, not surprisingly, that the content of the prayer mattered. For example, among a sample of cancer patients, those who focused their prayers on thankfulness and concern for others were found to have the least symptoms of depression. Consistent with the theory that religious faith increases self control, prayer has also been found to reduce unhealthy behavior. For example, across the series of studies, researchers found that the more people prayed, the less likely they were to drink heavily. This wasn't just because highly religious people are less inclined to do so to begin with. The researchers found that people assigned to pray daily for 4 weeks drank about half as much alcohol as participants in the control condition who were not directed to pray. Similarly, in a study that measured behavior over time, the researchers observed that a person's prayer at an earlier date predicted a reduction in alcohol consumption at a later date. A lot of that has to do with the ability to be able to discipline yourself. And when you have the ability to discipline yourself, to pray so many times per day, you also feel that you have the power to discipline yourself in behaviors that you don't like. Also, having prayer reduces the concept of anxiety, calms you down, and takes it away from something that you think you have to do because it's as if you're getting help from others. Um, and I know that when I've worked with addiction, a lot of the first concept of the 12th step is letting go and letting God. And the concept of it's not up to you and you don't have to only be the only one who's struggling and that you have help. And if you think it's out of control with your hand, then you give it away and you allow other sources, God's source, to support you. So it seems like that's how it has been working with many of the conversations about addiction. The benefits of prayer, the research says, extend to social bonds, a willingness to compromise and make personal sacrifices in critical, healthy, close relationships. Married couples who are happy to sacrifice for each other experience less marital distress. More broadly, sacrifice promotes trust, which strengthens relationships. Researchers found that prayer helps promote the value of sacrifice as well as the strength of a relationship. Also, prayer allows you to think about others and open yourself up and compromise with others, which works a lot with the concept of the prayer. Health and religion have always been intertwined, most obviously through prayer on behalf of the sick. Does intercessory prayer for sick people actually help heal? Well, for thousands of years, some people have believed so, but new Brandeis University research in the Journal of Religion this month shows that over the last 4 decades, medical studies of intercessory prayer and the prayer of strangers at a distance actually say more about the scientists conducting the studies than about the power of prayer to heal. Now, intercessory prayer has been a subject of scientific studies since at least the 19th centuries, when an English scientist, assuming that kings were prayed for more often than others, sought to find out whether those prayers were answered. He concluded that they were not, but that prayer might be a comfort to the people praying anyway. So after talking with physicians who wondered about the power of the prayer to heal patients, Brandeis psychologist Wendy Cage, an expert on the intersection of religion and medicine in contemporary American society, set out to research this medical studies of intersensory prayer going back to 1965, the first year such studies were published in the English language medical literature. So this analysis, the Journal of Religion, is the first to trace the social history of intersensory prayer studies and to situate them in their medical and religious context. So this year, in the Suzanne Young Murray Fellow of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, while there she is working on her forthcoming book, Paging God, Religion in the Halls of Medicine, Dr. Cage evaluated 18 published studies on intersensory prayer that were conducted between 1965 and 2006. Collectively, the studies provide a fascinating snapshot of changing American religious demographics, evolving ideas about the relationship between religion and medical science, and the development of the clinical trial as the gold standard of biomedical research. Now, she says, I don't know why physicians and scientists conducted these studies, but personal religious beliefs appear to have played a role along with the curiosity. The earliest studies undertaken in the 60s were based exclusively on Protestant prayers, while more recent studies reflecting growing social awareness of other religions combine Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, and other prayers. Some studies suggest that prayer worked, while others said it didn't. Now, the researchers leading the studies apply clinical scientific methodologies to the study of intersensory prayer, but Dr. Cage found that even that approach was fraught with problems. For example, researchers asked whether the people not being prayed for by the intercessors were truly a control group, since their family members were probably praying for them. Researchers also asked what the right dosage of prayer would be, how prayers should be offered, and what to do about a non-Christian intercessors. With double-blind clinical trials, scientific tried their best to study something that may be beyond their best tool and reflect more about them and their assumptions than about whether actually prayer worked or not. So reflecting a recent shift toward legitimizing studies of intersensory prayer, recent commentators in the medical literature concluded we do not need science to validate our spiritual belief, as we would never use faith to validate our scientific data. But more and more, as I went through a lot of the research to find all of this and bring it to you, I looked at different research that says absolutely not. And it didn't have any solution to the people who were being prayed for. One thing that it showed is that there is inconsistent data, and most of the data shows that when you pray, it doesn't necessarily do much for the person you're praying for, but it certainly does a lot for the person who's actually praying. Whether that praying it reduces their anxiety, whether it brings them into a grateful place, whether it creates calmness, whether they think that they're not alone in this big, huge world, and there's somebody that looks over them, and they feel this type of a sense of security because they think that there is someone out there that takes care of them and others, and therefore reduces their anxiety. It appeared that most of the research that showed benefit, it benefited the person who was actually praying. So guess what? If it's benefiting us to pray and meditate and hold this sense of gratefulness, why not? At least half of the equation is great. We who are praying get the benefit. Hopefully, if the science shows that it also benefits the people we're praying for or not, that would be 100% or some higher percent. If not, at least we get the benefits. So don't go anywhere. We're actually going to talk to Reverend Sylvia Sumter, who's currently the senior minister of Unity of Washington, D.C. And prior to her tenure in Washington, D.C., she served as the chairperson of Communication Studies and Skills Department for the Unity School of Religious Studies in Unity Village, Missouri. As a member of the faculty, she taught in ministerial education program and in the continuing education program. She's a natural gifted teacher who spent the early part of her career as a professional counselor in Institute of Higher Learning. She served as the Director of Higher Education Opportunity Program at Onondaga Community College in Syracuse, New York. Prior to the experience, she served as the Assistant Director of the Higher Education Opportunity Program at Syracuse University. Reverend Sumter has an uncanny ability to take the most fundamental teachings and principles of spirituality and many of life experiences to develop her message of inspiring individuals to transform their lives through an awareness of their innate divine potential. We'll be right back with Sylvia Sumter.
Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan, and I have great news for you. I'm offering a special time-limited offer to anyone who's interested in online therapy or coaching sessions. I've developed the awareness integration model, which allows in only 12 weeks to raise your self-esteem and confidence and let go of your thoughts and emotions that produce depression and anxiety for you. So call today to schedule your online session and save $600. Call me today at 818-648-2140. That's 818-648-2140. Or go to www.foojan.com.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, The Awareness Path to Create the Life You Want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490AM.com.
Take KMET 1490 AM with you everywhere you go by downloading our free smartphone apps found on the KMET website, KMET1490AM.com. You can also go to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store on your phone to download the free app. Now you can listen live or play any of your favorite programmers' podcasts using your smartphone. Don't miss out on the free KMET smartphone apps. Go to KMET1490AM.com and download your free phone app today.
Have you ever wished you could just wake up one day, reach across your nightstand, and hit the life reset button? Let's face it, the struggles and frustrations of everyday life leave millions of women and men around the globe yearning for a new way. And the new way is right here in Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want, by Dr. Foojan Zeine. You can get it now at Foojan.com or Amazon.com. Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want. You deserve it.
Hello, listeners. This is Christopher from The Christopher Show. Hey, if you missed one of our shows here at KMET, don't worry about it. You can go to our webpage, and that's KMET1490AM.com. Go to the homepage, click on the SoundCloud tab, and hear any show anytime you want.
Welcome back to Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and I'm so excited to have Reverend Sylvia Sumter, the Senior Minister of the Unity of Washington, D.C., with me. Welcome to my show, Reverend.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, I actually met you in Washington, D.C. first in the American Meditating Museum, and then we went together to India with Sister Jenna, and I got to know you really for a whole week, and it was a joy to have you, to learn from you, and it's like, we should have a liberating conversation on the show.
Excellent. I'm excited about it. I'm watching the work that you and others are doing, and it's very powerful. And so I'm delighted to be here.
It's beautiful. I just got the research from everything that kind of was out there this past year about all the research that had to do with prayer. And, some people say, some scientists find that it really just benefits us, the prayers, and not necessarily how it lands on others. And I know that you have a different conversation about meditation and prayer and how to be with the self and how to, request and be out there and how kind of bring the spirituality into the essence of who you are. And so tell me first, what got you to want to, expand the realm of spirituality for yourself?
Well, mine was a personal call. I've always been interested in marrying two of my favorite areas. One is spirituality, couple that with psychology. And I happened to just fall upon an approach which is a way of combining spirituality and psychology. And I think we can't do anything without our spirit. We're spirit, mind, and we have a physical body. So to tie all of that together brings us to a point of wholeness. You're not whole unless you're able to unify all the components that make up your nature: spiritual beings, mental, emotional beings, and physical beings. And so the spirituality is the top essence or element that is infused into the other two components or facets of our makeup. So we bring spirituality into our mind and mental capacity, and it also inhabits our physical bodies.
So tell me a little bit about your view on spirituality. When you talk about spirituality, what is spirituality in your world and as you define it for us?
Yes. For me, spirituality has to do with those universal principles that apply to everyone. So it's not religious, but because religions refer to culture, traditional aspects of how one might practice spirituality. That's religion. But spirituality are those qualities of being that belong to all of us. They're universal. Love, peace, health, wholeness. These are qualities that every living being on the planet desires and aspires to have. And we each express it in a different way, but it's more of the universal. And so as we collect ourselves and connect ourselves to those principles that sort of make us who we are as spiritual beings and as human beings, then we are practicing spirituality.
And you say that we're in the midst of a spiritual revolution. Yes. Say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, it's no secret that we are witnessing a tremendous change that is taking place on the planet, on the physical level with Mother Earth itself, and of course, all of us are undergoing what I call a spiritual awakening. And sometimes there has to be a breaking down before there's a building up or a birthing. And I believe that all the challenges that we are witnessing in the world really is the birthing of a new way for us to be with one another. And it's actually moving us beyond the limited thoughts we have of just defining ourselves pretty much as physical beings and maybe mental beings, but we don't give much credence to the spiritual capacity of who we are. And what is happening, I believe, is we're having an opportunity to see the call for us to all stand up in a higher fashion coming from a spiritual nature. Because, we all heard the statement that we're spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws. So we're not just human beings. Time for us to give to our spiritual nature. So the revolution that's happening is uncovering that. And thank God, because that is what's going to enable us to experience more connect. Even though what we're seeing feels like division and separation, but that's okay. We're looking at making the choice. When I see what's happening, I want to choose the better part of my humanity. I want to choose, we're opening up and waking up to saying, wow, you really are my sister. You really are my brother. And so we're seeing from a lens now of spirituality where we haven't done before, I think. So the next revolution, we can go to the moon, we can make all these great scientific advancements, but it's the inner soul. It's our consciousness. It is what enables us to really be a new species on this planet and stepping into our greater capacity. We haven't tapped it yet. We haven't even tapped what we are able to do from a spiritual perspective. And I think we're doing that now.
Reverend Sylvia, I'm also hearing you saying that spirituality is the principles, the higher level of principles that it governs all of us in a sense, if we look at it from a natural place, not to come from like a rule that I have to adhere to, but something that becomes an innate calling from inside to uphold those principles, to live by those principles, and then share those principles. And as we grow to live those types of principles, such as being loving, being truthful, being on integrity, any of those principles that we believe that would bring us together, that would bring us as a unity, it would make us as a culture, as a human being, and as a species to survive. And not get destroyed, not destroy ourselves pretty much. As right. I'm hearing you saying that that's where you say spirituality is something beyond us, something beyond my, regular, just personal ego, that it's me, but it's something beyond that. And you also talk about broadcasting who you are and live by those in a conscious moment. Can you talk a little bit about how do we broadcast who we are, and how can we move into more of a conscientious space where we could live by the principles while, as a human being, we all live in this type of a duality consistently?
Yes. Well, I love the fact that you say that who we are broadcasts itself to others. And by our thoughts, our feelings, our attitudes, our choices, the way we are being in life is broadcasting who we are. But the beautiful thing is that we have conscious choice that we can make to change the path we're on, to change our minds, to change our hearts, and to choose the higher and best of who we are. But that means we have to experience a certain level of inner integrity. Of really getting to know who we are from an authentic place. You see, so many of us live our lives by what we think others or how we've been, perhaps from childhood, from our cultural perspective and families, friends, society. But when we begin this process of moving me to the we, to the collective, because that's who we are spiritually. That's what's trying to birth itself at this point. But as we move from the me, we still have to be very much in tune with this journey of the self, uncovering and living from a very authentic place, which means we have to practice inner integrity, which means it's not so much about the face that I'm showing, it's not about the ideals that I think you might want me to project, but it's really practicing integrity It's being honest with my current state of being. It's being honest with where I am. It's being honest with all of my wonderful, valuable traits and qualities, but also acknowledging my growing edges, acknowledging the hidden parts, the shadow parts, because that's what gets expressed outwardly when we're not conscious of trying to mask and hold down that which we might not deem as beautiful and loving, because as human beings, we run the gamut and the spectrum of emotions and feelings and thoughts. So being conscious of what is taking place in my inner world, my inner realm, and being authentic with, gee, I'm feeling a little jealous, or I'm feeling a little angry, because when you can see that and you can acknowledge that, it dissipates the energy of what happens when you are run by those emotions unconsciously. So if we're going to move into this next phase, we've got to be conscious, not only of what's happening out here, but what is taking place in my own inner world, so that I can heal it, see it. You can't heal what you can't see. You can't heal what you don't acknowledge. And so if I'm going to really be this wonderful powerhouse of a spiritual being, I have to be authentic in terms of understanding what's taking place in my own inner world before I try to transform the outer world. So I think that's our journey.
Very much.
And yeah.
I listen to you and you talk about integrity of who we are and our truth. And I know that many of us don't really see, are not aware of the way that we show up in life out here. We're so sometimes engrossed in our thoughts and our ups and downs and our fears and, defense mechanisms and how to survive the world at that moment, or if we've learned that by force or by manipulation or somehow to get what we needed, and we thought that would be the concept of, survival in the world and living in the world, and just coming from that limited space, that many times in my office, I see that the person doesn't really look at the impact of who they are and how they're living and how they're thinking in their own system and in the world as around them, such as in their relationships. So the concept of awareness of what they're doing is, like you said, the first step to even going toward the integration of what they're doing afterward, integration of themselves. And what is it that this type of the shift between the psychology and the spirituality shows up in the concept of integrity with the self, as you talk about? So obviously, in my model and the way that I work in psychology, the integrity shows up as we just talked about it. How do you add the spiritual world into this part of the integrity of the self?
Well, the spiritual, because of the premise and belief that we are spiritual beings. So we're spiritual beings, mental beings. And so as we get acclimated to identifying ourselves first as a spiritual being, having spiritual qualities, and when people really understand who they really are, as opposed to their identity and their personality, I'm a doctor, a lawyer, those are how you're showing up. But when you really recognize your spiritual nature and the power that lies within the spirit to transform life itself and your life in particular, when we step into that overrides everything. And when people recognize that I'm not just a lowly, individual, but I'm actually part of the divine creation of life itself, and that whatever force you want to call it, the divine, God, whatever, that essence, that creative force resides within me. That essence inspires. That's what the inspiration is. It is the infilling of my spirit. It gives me energy. It gives me life. And so when we start to connect on that level of who we really are, then we are empowered to express more of those qualities. And that's what I mean by the spiritual revolution. We're waking up to who we are as spiritual beings and not limited by our fears and doubts. We have to move through them. But when you move through them from a higher spiritual perspective, it's like shining a light into the darkness. And once you begin to shine the light of the spiritual essence of who you are into the innermost regions of your own being, the light dissipates the darkness. And so that you're then able to release those fears or the mechanisms that we use to keep ourselves separate or feeling, falsely superior or inferior. All those things begin to dissipate. And it's an inner process.
So part of what you're also saying is that you got to change your perspective and your thoughts about who you are. That if you are only looking at yourself as a human species, which has to deal with a bunch of emotions and you just have to feed yourself and you got to, survive the world, then within that limited construct, you're going to behave a particular way and you're always kind of going back and forth in your mind and your life within a very limited space. But when you change your thoughts, change your view about who you really are, and then attach or connect to the source of who you really are, the come from, it gets expanded, and you're not just holding on to a very, very minute level of yourself and how you have to deal with other human being, but now you get this sense of expansion. And from that sense of expansion, the way you deal with yourself and the world will be different.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. And the more we connect, I love the fact you said connecting to the source, and by whatever name you want to call it, but the more we connect to that energy, the force, the essence of the greater expression of life, the more we begin to change. But it's a natural unfolding. There's a natural ease that, as I said, the challenges begin to fall away, but we must change. You have to make a conscious connection, a conscious choice to plug in. We're also plugged in to our devices, but when we plug to the spiritual energy, the spiritual force, the creative force of the universe, well, then our life has more power, it has more vibrancy, and we begin to function differently. The same kinds of thoughts don't run through your mind. Higher thoughts begin to enter into your awareness. You're more susceptible to intuition, which is not a hunch or a guessing, but divine intuition is a direct knowing. It's a sort of a spiritual download, if you will. So our thoughts begin to change. Our energy field begins to change. And when that happens, who we begin to attract changes and how we interact changes. And it's a sort of a natural unfolding. So we don't think that I've got to do it all, but there's just a transformation that happens.
Mm-hmm. How do you offer prayer and meditation to access these higher powers and intuitive parts? Is there a particular way that you teach as a minister of the Unity Church? Is there a way that you show the particular ways of prayer and meditation to guide the person to actually access who they really are?
Yes, we do. We have a plan, because for us, prayer isn't about begging God to give you things. In its truest form, it is about making that conscious connection with the all that is. And because we are a part of that, we don't see ourselves as separate from life, separate from the universe, or even separate from God. That spirit indwells us. And as we train ourselves to simply become still, to learn how to go within, and we do some breathing exercises to quiet the body and quiet the mind, so that we then have access to the spiritual components of who we are. Everything that we need lies within us. It's not outside of us. We don't have to struggle and beg to get it. We just have to be still and open ourselves to the experience of it, bringing light, bringing love, bringing the capacity to our consciousness and making that connection. It's just a matter of seeing and making a conscious connection and slowing down the breathing and the busyness of the mind and the busyness of the body. And in that stillness, we become one. In that stillness, we recognize our divine connection. And when we are still is when the divine has an opportunity to impress our soul and our consciousness. Most of the time we don't hear because we're so busy moving and chatting and doing. But when you're still and you're in that receiving mode, in that connecting mode, the universe opens up to you. Mm-hmm. Your consciousness is then expanded and things begin to come into your awareness that you might not have known or experienced before.
So it's like as the brain just does what it does, which is constantly thinking and going around, when we have the ability to a bit of slowing it down and creating some silent moments around it, then within those silent moments of the chatter that shows up consistently, there are parts of us that holds on and becomes aware of that type of an integrating of a self, and gives us access to all of who we are, access into all aspects of our brain and all aspects of who we are. And if, connecting to something beyond of what just the chatter consistently offers, that comes from a source of anxiety about survival versus expansion of, we are way beyond just the species that needs surviving. We are way beyond that. So it's like having access to more of an information and ability to see the bigger picture. And it requires us to quiet the mind, let go of all of the stuff that's coming from the outside, the stimuli that comes from outside, in order to actually connect within ourselves and something that is beyond us.
Exactly. You could be a unity minister, my goodness.
I'm a good reflector.
Yes. Well, that's what it is. It's entering into what we call the silence. We just enter into the silence and we rest. We allow our minds and our bodies to rest in the presence of the presence. And, most of your geniuses or people who've had these wonderful insights, be it Albert Einstein, or George Washington Carver, they would tell you that they allowed themselves to just be open without the interference of the mind and to be open, and that they were then fed and connected to these wonderful experiences and insights that were beyond their conscious knowledge, and they accessed universal wisdom that we all have access to. It resides within us. But we're so busy with the chat that we don't tap into the universal wisdom. And when we present ourselves to the presence that is all around us, it's marvelous what happens, because it's beyond thinking. Intuition is beyond thinking.
Yes.
It's beyond feeling.
Reverend Sylvia, when you talk about prayer, because I know as you spoke, you said prayer, you don't mean it in a way of, okay, we're going to sit there and beg God to do something. How do you introduce prayer, and what do you think that prayer does for us?
So Unity has a particular way in which we pray. We call it affirmative prayer, meaning we make an affirmation, and an affirmation is a positive statement of truth. So if I want to experience health and wholeness, I don't go to God begging, can you heal me, heal me, heal me? I would affirm I am whole and well in body and mind. Even if the manifestation has not yet appeared, I claim the affirmation of what I desire. So my prayer, know that really, in a largest sense, I am with wholeness and health. I have that to forth in terms of manifesting. I don't pray about sickness. I want to affirm wholeness. So it's a slight difference. So I don't beg God to. Prayer doesn't change God. It changes. Because we don't have the power to change God. But what prayer does, it changes my perceptions. It changes my awareness so that I can move beyond the thought that, I'm ill, to a thought that wholeness exists and I can experience that wholeness here and now. I can be transformed. But it's my consciousness that needs to be transformed to accept it, to believe in the possibility, to make that connection.
So what I hear from you is that meditation is utilized for quieting the mind, calming down, opening that space where we could actually get off the chatter and be with our own being in a sense where we integrate it. And then I sense what you're saying about the prayer is the intentionality of what we intend for ourselves and people around us, and the outcome that we intend to create. And that's what you actually pray for, whether you're doing it, whether you're letting yourself know in how the intention is and how you're going to do it, or that you are choosing to intend it and allow other people who are around you also to bring forth that concept of, the result being actualized, such as, if I'm looking at health, as an example that you said, one is as I'm more aware and stop the chatter and look at kind of this within the quietness of my mind, what are the things that I'm doing that is not appropriate for my health? What are the things that I can be doing? What if my body is giving messages to me, which I need to listen, and then hold myself in a space where I can gather more information. Other people might have information who are coming through. And as I stop listening to my chatter, I can actually receive information from outside world where I can be healing for me and moving forward. So that would be a little bit of a distinction that I'm hearing between like a meditation and a prayer from the way that you're offering it. So we have about less than even 1 minute. Anything that we haven't talked about that you really, really want our listeners and viewers to know about you and your message?
Well, I just want them to know, to have hope, to remain positive, because we are on a journey and we are birthing something wonderful. So, be a light bearer, continue to shine your light and express and broadcast the best and the highest of who you are, because that's what we all need each other to do. So I'm just here excited about life and moving from the me to the we. So join me on the journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us and with everybody who's listening and viewing us. Create an amazing life of integrity, highest level of spirituality and wellness for yourself and everyone around you, because you certainly can. Have a great, great week, and I'll see you here next week. Bye-bye.
The Inner Voice Show is a dialogue between the host and the listeners about their relationships. This show is not an attempt to assess, diagnose, or treat any mental health or illness condition. Please consult your physician, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist for personal matters.
KMET Manning.
From ABC News, I'm Brian Clark. A new day is coming to Latin America. That's the message President Trump delivered to the largest Venezuelan community in the U.S.
Trump reiterated his government's support for Juan Guaido, the head of Venezuela's National Assembly. He said Guaido represents a rejection of the politics of ousted President Nicolas Maduro.
The Venezuelan people have spoken, and the world has heard their beautiful voice. They are turning the page on socialism.
Maduro has refused to leave and still has backing within the military. Foreign nations like Russia, China, and Cuba also still support him. Maduro is currently blocking the transfer of U.S. humanitarian aid from Colombia to Venezuela. Ali Rogan, ABC News, Washington.
The man at the center of a ballot fraud investigation in North Carolina will not take the stand. Leslie McCrae Dowless is accused of using illegal methods to boost the number of mail-in ballots going to a Republican congressional candidate last year. His attorney told the state elections board a subpoena only asked him to appear at a hearing. In Michigan, Kent County Sheriff Michelle LaJoy Young confirms those found shot to death on a property include a woman and 3 children.
Very, very sad. It's always hard when there's deaths in the community, but it's absolutely the most difficult when there are kids involved.
She says they're looking at all scenarios, including a possible murder-suicide. Activist Chuck Adams of Aurora, Illinois, says the community's looking for answers after gunman Gary Martin opened fire at his workplace Friday and killed 5 people.
There is considerable anger and frustration in the community about the availability of guns to angry and dangerous men like the perpetrator of this heinous act.
State police say Martin had his firearm permit revoked, but his gun was not seized. All 30 teachers' unions in West Virginia have called a statewide work stoppage beginning tomorrow over an education bill they view as retaliation. Markets were closed for President's Day. You're listening to ABC News.
Ever wonder why Europeans seem to speak so many languages? Maybe it's because they use Babbel, the #1 selling language learning app in Europe. Babbel's award-winning technology gets you speaking right away, whether you're learning Spanish, French, or German. And best of all, you'll remember what you've learned.
I always thought I was bad at languages, but after using Babbel, I can tell you